The dust settled over Redwood Valley as the sun dipped behind jagged mountains, casting long shadows across weathered wooden buildings that had seen better days. In this forgotten corner of the Arizona Territory, where civilization barely clung to existence, strange bargains were struck and stranger debts were paid. The year was 1873, and for most folks in these parts, survival meant accepting whatever hand fate dealt you, no matter how peculiar the cards might be. Samuel Hartwell stood at the edge of his failing ranch, watching his last 3 sheep graze on what little grass remained after 2 years of drought. The bank notice crumpled in his weathered hands told the same story he'd been avoiding for months. Foreclosure was coming, swift and merciless as a desert storm. At 35, Sam had already buried 1 wife to consumption and lost 2 children to the harsh realities of frontier life. Now, it seemed he was about to lose everything else that mattered. The sound of approaching hoofbeats broke through his dark thoughts. A stranger rode toward the ranch, leading a pack mule laden with supplies. The man was well dressed for these parts, his black suit barely dusty despite the long ride from town. His pale skin suggested he was new to the territory, but his confident bearing spoke of a man accustomed to getting his way. "You Samuel Hartwell?" the stranger called out, dismounting with practiced ease. His voice carried a slight accent, something European that Sam couldn't quite place. The man was perhaps 40 years old, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to take in every detail of the struggling ranch with calculating precision. "Depends who's asking," Sam replied, his hand instinctively moving closer to the Colt revolver at his hip. Strangers in these parts usually brought trouble, and this one had an unsettling quality about him that set Sam's nerves on edge. "Name's Victor Brennan. I understand you're in some financial difficulty." The stranger's smile didn't reach his eyes as he gestured toward the foreclosure notice still clutched in Sam's fist. "Word travels fast in small towns, and I make it my business to know when opportunity knocks." Sam's jaw tightened. The last thing he needed was some city slicker coming to gloat over his misfortune or offer to buy his land for pennies on the dollar. "If you're here to make some lowball offer for my property, you can turn around right now and ride back to whatever rock you crawled out from under." Victor's laugh was soft but somehow menacing. "Oh, Mr. Hartwell, you misunderstand my intentions entirely. I'm not here to take anything from you. Quite the opposite, in fact. I'm here to offer you a solution to all your problems. A way to keep your ranch, pay your debts, and perhaps even prosper in ways you never imagined." Despite himself, Sam felt a flicker of hope. Desperation made a man consider options he might otherwise dismiss without a second thought. "I'm listening, but I warn you, if this is some kind of confidence game, you picked the wrong mark. No games, Mr. Hartwell. Simply a business proposition." Victor reached into his coat and withdrew a leather pouch that jingled with the unmistakable sound of gold coins. "I have a daughter. Her name is Isabella, and she's of marriageable age. 22 years old, beautiful, well-educated, and in need of a husband. In exchange for your agreement to marry her, I'm prepared to pay off all your debts and provide you with enough capital to make this ranch profitable again." Sam stared at the stranger in disbelief. "You want me to marry your daughter? A woman I've never even met? What kind of father sells his child to a stranger?" "The kind who understands that sometimes unconventional arrangements benefit everyone involved," Victor replied smoothly. "Isabella is aware of the arrangement and has consented to it. She understands the practical nature of frontier marriage and the advantages it provides for both parties. You get financial security and a wife to help manage your household. She gets a husband and a home of her own, far from the complications of her past." The mention of complications sent another warning signal through Sam's mind, but the weight of the gold pouch in Victor's hand was hard to ignore. 3 years of drought, failed crops, and mounting debts had pushed him to the brink of ruin. Whatever this arrangement was, it might be his only chance to save everything he'd worked for. "Why me?" Sam asked. "There must be plenty of men back east who'd jump at the chance to marry a wealthy man's daughter. Why come all the way out here to the middle of nowhere?" Victor's expression darkened slightly. "Let's just say that Isabella requires a fresh start, somewhere far from her previous life. The Arizona territory offers the kind of isolation and anonymity that would benefit her greatly. As for why you specifically, I've made inquiries. You're known as an honest man, a hard worker, and someone who keeps his word. Those are valuable qualities in a husband. Sam found himself wavering. The practical part of his mind recognized the offer for what it was, a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. But something about Victor's demeanor, the way he avoided direct answers about his daughter's past, suggested there was more to the story than he was revealing. I'd need to meet her first, Sam said finally. I won't marry a woman sight unseen, no matter how desperate my situation might be. Of course, Isabella is currently staying at the hotel in town. The wedding could take place as early as this weekend if you're amenable to the arrangement. The preacher in Copper Springs has already been informed of the possibility. The speed with which Victor had arranged everything was both impressive and unsettling. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision on the stranger's part. He'd clearly been planning this for some time, which raised even more questions about his true motives. As if reading Sam's thoughts, Victor added, "Time is somewhat of the essence in this matter, Mr. Hartwell. I have business interests that require my attention elsewhere, and I'd prefer to see Isabella settled before I must depart. Hence the urgency of my proposal." Sam looked around his failing ranch once more, weighing his limited options. Accept the stranger's bizarre offer and marry a woman he'd never met, or lose everything he'd spent his adult life building. When put in those terms, the choice seemed almost simple. "I'll meet your daughter tomorrow," he said finally. "If she's agreeable and seems like someone I could build a life with, then we can discuss terms. But I want to be clear about something, Mr. Brennan. Marriage is sacred to me. I won't treat your daughter like property or a business transaction, no matter what arrangement we make." Victor's smile returned, broader this time and somehow more genuine. "I wouldn't expect anything less, Mr. Hartwell. Isabella is a remarkable young woman, and I'm confident you'll find her quite suitable. Shall we say tomorrow afternoon at the hotel? 2:00. They shook hands on it, and Victor mounted his horse with the same fluid grace he'd displayed earlier. As he prepared to ride away, he turned back one final time. "Oh, and Mr. Hartwell, I should mention that as part of our agreement, you'll receive not just the money to save your ranch, but also a rather unique wedding gift, something that once belonged to Isabella's mother. I think you'll find it quite valuable." With that cryptic statement, Victor spurred his horse toward town, leaving Sam alone with more questions than answers, and the distinct feeling that he was about to step into something far more complicated than a simple marriage of convenience. The next afternoon found Sam standing outside the Copper Springs Hotel, his best shirt freshly pressed and his hair slicked back with water from the town's single barber shop. He'd spent most of the previous evening and all of that morning wrestling with doubts about the arrangement, but his practical nature kept bringing him back to the same conclusion. This might be his only chance to save his ranch and start over. The hotel lobby was nearly empty when he entered. Just the desk clerk and an elderly woman knitting in one of the worn leather chairs by the window. Victor appeared at the top of the stairs almost immediately, as if he'd been watching for Sam's arrival. "Mr. Hartwell, punctual as promised. Isabella is in the sitting room just through those doors. I thought it might be best if you two had a chance to speak privately first." Sam nodded, straightening his shoulders as he approached the indicated door. Whatever lay beyond it would determine the course of his future, for better or worse. He knocked gently and heard a soft voice bid him enter. The woman who rose from the settee near the window was undeniably beautiful, but there was something haunting about her appearance that stopped Sam short. Isabella Brennan had lustrous dark hair pinned up in an elaborate style and wore a deep blue dress that spoke of expensive tastes. Her skin was pale, almost luminously so, and her green eyes held depths that seemed far older than her 22 years. "Mr. Hartwell, I presume," she said, offering her hand with a grace that suggested excellent breeding. Her voice carried the same faint accent as her father's, musical but somehow melancholy. "Father has told me so much about you. Please, won't you sit?" As Sam settled into the chair across from her, he found himself studying her face more closely. She was certainly lovely, but there was something almost ethereal about her beauty, as if she weren't quite solid. The afternoon sunlight streaming through the window seemed to pass through her rather than illuminate her features. "Miss Brennan, I hope you understand that this whole arrangement is as unusual for me as it probably is for you," Sam began, trying to put both of them at ease. "Your father mentioned that you're aware of the circumstances of his proposal." Isabella's smile was sad but genuine. "Indeed I am, Mr. Hartwell, and I want you to know that I'm not some helpless victim being bartered away against her will. The truth is, I need this arrangement as much as you do, perhaps more so. There are circumstances in my past that make a conventional marriage impossible for me." "What kind of circumstances?" Sam asked gently. "If we're to be married, I think I have a right to know what I'm getting myself into." Isabella rose and moved to the window, her movements graceful but somehow insubstantial. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Have you ever done something terrible, Mr. Hartwell? Something so awful that it changed you forever, made you into someone you no longer recognized?" The pain in her voice was unmistakable, and Sam felt his protective instincts stirring. Whatever had happened to this young woman, it had left deep scars. "We've all made mistakes, Miss Brennan. The question is whether we can learn from them and build something better." She turned back to him, and for just a moment, Sam could have sworn he saw something flicker in her eyes, something that wasn't quite human. But then she was smiling again, and he decided it must have been a trick of the light. "You're very kind, Mr. Hartwell. Kinder than I deserve, I think. But yes, I believe we could build something good together, if you're willing to accept that there are things about me you may never fully understand." Despite the mysterious nature of her words, Sam found himself drawn to Isabella's obvious vulnerability. There was something about her that called to his protective nature, a quality that made him want to shield her from whatever shadows haunted her past. "I reckon we all have our secrets, Miss Brennan. What matters is what we do moving forward." They spent the next hour talking about practical matters. Their expectations for married life, how they would manage the ranch together, and what kind of future they hoped to build. Isabella proved to be intelligent and well-educated, with insights about ranch management that surprised Sam. She'd clearly given serious thought to what their life together might look like. As the afternoon wore on, Sam found himself increasingly comfortable with the arrangement. Isabella was nothing like what he'd expected from Victor's daughter. She was thoughtful, kind, and seemed genuinely interested in making their unusual marriage work. It was only when Victor returned to check on their progress that the strange undercurrents of the situation reasserted themselves. The moment her father entered the room, Isabella seemed to shrink into herself, becoming somehow smaller and less substantial. "I trust your conversation has been productive," Victor said, his calculating gaze moving between them. "Have you reached an understanding?" Sam looked at Isabella, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "Yes, sir. If Miss Brennan is agreeable, I'd be honored to marry her." Victor's smile was triumphant. "Excellent. I've taken the liberty of making arrangements with Reverend Collins for a ceremony this Saturday evening. The necessary paperwork has been prepared, and your debt situation has already been addressed, Mr. Hartwell. You'll find your accounts at the bank have been settled as of this morning." The speed and efficiency with which Victor had handled everything was both impressive and deeply unsettling. Sam was beginning to realize that this man was far more powerful and well-connected than his appearance in a remote Arizona Territory town might suggest. Saturday evening arrived with unseasonable storm clouds gathering over Copper Springs. The small church was nearly empty, with only Victor, the Reverend, and a handful of townspeople present to witness the ceremony. Isabella appeared at the appointed time wearing a white dress that seemed to shimmer in the lamplight, her beauty almost otherworldly in the church's dim interior. The ceremony itself was brief and formal, with none of the joy typically associated with weddings. Isabella's responses were soft but clear, and when the time came to exchange rings, Victor produced a delicate band set with a stone that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "With this ring, I thee wed," Sam said, slipping the unusual ring onto Isabella's finger. The moment the metal touched her skin, he felt a strange chill pass through the church, as if the temperature had suddenly dropped by 20 degrees. Isabella's response was equally traditional, but when she placed Sam's ring on his finger, Her hands were ice-cold despite the warm evening. The preacher seemed to rush through the final portions of the ceremony, as if he too sensed something unusual about the proceedings. "You may kiss the bride," Reverend Collins announced, and Sam leaned forward to fulfill the traditional obligation. Isabella's lips were soft but cold, and for just an instant, Sam felt as though he were kissing empty air. As the small group dispersed after the ceremony, Victor pulled Sam aside while Isabella gathered her few belongings from the hotel. "Remember what I mentioned about a wedding gift, Mr. Hartwell? It's waiting for you at your ranch. Something that belonged to Isabella's mother, as I promised." "What kind of gift?" Sam asked, but Victor was already moving away, his attention focused on his daughter. The ride back to the ranch was quiet, with Isabella seated beside Sam on the wagon seat, her hands folded in her lap and her eyes fixed on the darkening horizon. The storm that had been threatening all day was finally beginning to break, with occasional drops of rain spattering the dry ground. "Are you having second thoughts?" Sam asked as they approached the ranch house. The building looked different somehow, as if changes had been made in his absence. "No," Isabella replied softly. "This is where I belong now. This is where I must be." Her phrasing struck Sam as odd, but before he could question it further, they were pulling up in front of the house. Oil lamps glowed warmly in the windows, and Sam realized someone had been here preparing for their arrival. Victor's efficiency continued to astound him. As they entered the house, Sam immediately noticed changes. The rooms had been cleaned and furnished with items he'd never seen before. Heavy drapes covered the windows, and ornate mirrors had been hung on several walls. Most striking of all was a large portrait above the fireplace, depicting a woman who bore a striking resemblance to Isabella. "My mother," Isabella explained, following Sam's gaze. "Victor had it brought from our home back east. That must be the gift he mentioned." But as Sam studied the portrait more closely, something about it bothered him. The woman in the painting had the same ethereal quality as Isabella, the same sense of being somehow not quite solid. And her eyes seemed to follow him as he moved around the room, watching with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "She's beautiful," he said diplomatically. "You favor her greatly." Isabella's expression grew sad. "Yes, though I pray I don't share her fate." Before Sam could ask what she meant by that, Isabella excused herself to change out of her wedding dress. Left alone in the sitting room, Sam found himself drawn repeatedly to the portrait. There was something hypnotic about it, something that made him want to keep looking even though it made him deeply uneasy. It was then that he noticed the small brass nameplate at the bottom of the frame. The inscription read, "Elena Brennan, 1831 to 1855. Sam did the mathematics quickly in his head. If the dates were correct, Isabella's mother had died when she was only 24 years old, and Isabella herself would have been just 4 at the time. The sound of Isabella's footsteps on the stairs interrupted his thoughts. She had changed into a simple white nightgown and robe, her dark hair hanging loose around her shoulders. In the lamplight, she looked even more ethereal than before, almost translucent. "Sam," she said, her voice hesitant. "There's something I need to tell you about our marriage, something important that you should understand before tonight." The gravity in her tone made Sam's stomach clench with apprehension. "What is it, Isabella? What haven't you told me?" She moved to the window and drew back one of the heavy drapes, revealing the storm that was now raging outside. Lightning illuminated her face in stark relief, and for just a moment, Sam could have sworn he saw through her to the window behind. "I'm not like other women, Sam. The circumstances Victor mentioned, the reason I needed to leave my old life behind, it's because I'm not entirely alive." Sam stared at her, certain he had misheard. "What do you mean, not entirely alive?" "Isabella, you're standing right here talking to me." She turned from the window, and in the lamplight, Sam could see tears streaming down her pale cheeks. "I died, Sam. 3 years ago on my 19th birthday. There was an accident, or perhaps it wasn't an accident at all. The details are unclear, but I remember falling, and then darkness." The rational part of Sam's mind rejected what she was saying as impossible, the ravings of a disturbed young woman. But looking at her now, remembering her cold touch, her strange translucent quality in certain light, he found himself believing her despite every logical objection. "That's impossible," he whispered. "Dead people don't talk, don't walk around, don't get married." "Most don't," Isabella agreed. "But sometimes, when the circumstances are right, when there are debts to be paid and bargains to be kept, the dead can be brought back. Not truly alive, but not entirely gone either. Trapped between worlds, belonging fully to neither." Sam sank into a chair, his mind reeling. "Victor brought you back? How? Why?" "Victor isn't my father," Isabella said, her voice growing stronger now that the truth was finally being revealed. "He's something else, something ancient and powerful that feeds on human desperation and makes bargains with those who have nowhere else to turn. He found me after my death, offered my real father a chance to see me again, to have me back. The price was my eternal service to Victor, helping him make deals with other desperate souls." The pieces were beginning to fall into place in Sam's horrified mind. "And I'm one of those desperate souls. You're here to secure some kind of bargain." "Yes and no," Isabella said, moving closer to him. "Victor needs souls, Sam. Living souls bound to him through contracts and debts. Marriage creates a bond that he can exploit. But there's something he doesn't know, something I've discovered about my condition." She knelt beside his chair, her cold hands reaching for his. "Love, real love between two souls, can break his power. If we can create something genuine between us, if we can build the kind of marriage that transcends his calculations and contracts, we can free ourselves from his control." Sam looked into her eyes, searching for any sign of deception. What he saw there was hope, desperate and fragile, but unmistakably real. "You're asking me to fall in love with a dead woman." "I'm asking you to try," Isabella whispered, "because the alternative is that Victor owns us both, forever." Thunder crashed outside, and in its wake, they heard the sound of approaching horses. Isabella's eyes widened with fear. "He's coming back. He said he had business elsewhere, but he lied. He wants to make sure the binding takes hold." "What binding?" Sam demanded, but even as he asked, he felt it beginning. A strange tugging sensation in his chest, as if something were trying to pull his soul from his body. The wedding ring on his finger grew warm, then hot, and he realized it was the source of the sensation. "The rings?" Isabella gasped, her own band beginning to glow with an eerie light. "They're not just symbols. They're chains binding us to him through our marriage bond. Fight it, Sam. Don't let him take your soul." But the pull was growing stronger, and Sam felt his consciousness beginning to fragment. Part of him was being drawn away, pulled toward something dark and hungry that waited in the space between life and death. He tried to resist, but the force was overwhelming. It was Isabella's touch that saved him. Her cold hands gripped his face, and suddenly her lips were on his, kissing him with desperate intensity. The moment their mouths met, the pulling sensation stopped, replaced by something entirely different. Warmth flowed between them, and Sam felt more alive than he had in years. When they broke apart, both rings had stopped glowing, their power apparently neutralized by whatever had passed between them. Outside, the sound of horses had stopped, but they could hear Victor's voice cursing in a language that definitely wasn't English. "It worked," Isabella breathed, wonder in her voice. "The connection between us, it's real. It's blocking his power." The front door burst open, and Victor strode into the room, his face twisted with rage. He no longer looked like the composed businessman who had made the original proposal. His true nature was showing through, something ancient and predatory that had never been fully human. "Impossible," he snarled. "The binding was perfect. The contracts were signed in blood and witnessed by powers older than this continent. How did you break it?" "Love," Isabella said simply, rising to stand beside Sam. "Something you've never understood and never will." Victor's laugh was bitter. "Love? You think mortal emotions can overcome forces that have existed since the dawn of time? You're both fools." He raised his hand, and Sam felt the pulling sensation return, stronger than before. But this time Isabella was ready. She grabbed Sam's hand, and together they focused on the connection they discovered, the genuine feeling that had sparked between them in their moment of desperate need. The battle was brief but intense. Victor's power crashed against the shield of their joined souls like waves against a cliff, powerful but ultimately futile. Whatever had been awakened between Sam and Isabella was stronger than the ancient contracts and binding spells. With a shriek of frustrated rage, Victor began to fade, his form becoming as insubstantial as mist. "This isn't over," he warned. "There are other contracts, other debts. I will collect what's owed to me." "Not from us," Sam said firmly, his arm around Isabella's waist. "Whatever power you had here is broken." Victor's form dissolved completely, leaving only the echo of his voice lingering in the air. "We shall see, Samuel Hartwell. We shall see." In the silence that followed, Sam and Isabella stood holding each other, both trembling from the encounter. The storm outside was beginning to clear, and the first rays of dawn were creeping through the windows. "Is it really over?" Sam asked. Isabella looked up at him, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked fully alive. Color had returned to her cheeks, and her eyes held warmth instead of haunting sadness. "I think so. I can feel something changing in me. Something that's been dead for 3 years starting to come back to life." Sam kissed her again, and this time her lips were warm. Whatever Victor had done to bind her between life and death was unraveling, replaced by something far more powerful and infinitely more precious. "So what happens now?" he asked. Isabella smiled, and it was like watching the sun rise after the longest night of winter. "Now we build the life we both deserve. We run this ranch together. We learn to love each other properly. And we prove that some things are stronger than the darkness that tries to claim them." As the morning light filled their home, Sam felt a profound sense of peace settle over him. He'd entered into this arrangement out of desperation, expecting nothing more than a business transaction that would save his ranch. Instead, he'd found something he'd never dared hope for: a second chance at love, and a partner strong enough to face whatever challenges the future might bring. The portrait above the fireplace caught his eye one final time, but now Elena Brennan's painted eyes seemed to hold approval rather than warning. Perhaps she too had faced Victor's power in her lifetime, and perhaps her daughter's victory was somehow hers as well. Isabella followed his gaze and squeezed his hand. "She would be proud," she said softly. She always believed that love was the most powerful force in any world, living or dead. Sam nodded, understanding at last why Victor's bargain had ultimately failed. He'd counted on human weakness and desperation, but he'd underestimated the strength that could be found when two souls truly connected. Whatever trials lay ahead for them, Sam and Isabella would face them together, bound not by dark contracts or supernatural coercion, but by the simple, powerful truth of love freely given and received. The sun climbed higher over Redwood Valley, burning away the last shadows of the storm, and Sam Hartwell began his new life with a bride who had literally returned from death to find him. It was not the conventional marriage either of them had ever imagined, but it was theirs, and that made it perfect.